Welcome back to the War Room. Svihlik and Shooter back at it. DJ, great episode from us, if I must say so myself, on the college stuff. I have a little more passion for the high school guys just because we follow them for 4 years. Great track record on it. But that's what we're going to talk about today, our high school draft board finalizing in the lead up to the MLB draft, July 14th, which we will have awesome coverage of. Please check back. All social media platforms, prepbaseball.com. Right at the top, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. That's what I love to do, apparently, here.
Right.
Hot seat. What is it like drafting a high school guy? How does that go into effect? How do we put those things together?
Yeah, gosh, you just nailed it right there. We're good at prep players. That's what we do here at Prep Baseball. And for anybody that's involved in scouting, area scouting, it is so much fun and exciting to go out and watch prep players. They're young, they're 17, they're 18 years old. They give you a chance to dream and imagine what they could become with professional coaching. And a lot of times, Shooter, the thing about these high school players, they're just as talented as the 21-year-old college guys.
Mm-hmm.
However, they're not as skilled. So that's the key. They're not as skilled, but they are as talented. So what are teams supposed to do? Let's not forget some of the things that we talked about earlier. The end game here for these teams, especially when you're in these premium rounds, in the top 2 or 3 rounds, the guys that are the top 50 players on your board, the end game here is to try to select 2 WAR players. When somebody says to you, our goal in the draft is to draft impact players, that's what they're talking about. Players that are 2 WAR or better players. So here's the deal with high school players. Yes, they are as talented, but when you know what the outcomes are, which are very small, you're talking about a few players, hitters, position players, and pitchers that will fulfill that outcome that everybody wants them to become. So the question for teams when they're putting their boards together is how restrictive do they make it? And what are the barriers to entry? And what type of guardrails do they set up to make sure that those high school players that are making it onto their top 50, which are the players that they're going to invest the most amount of money into. Most of the pool money is going to come in those top 2 or 3 rounds. That is not to say that you can't select a DJ Hers like the Nationals did in the 8th or 9th round back in 2019, I think it was. And that's a great pick. I watched him pitch on TV the other night. Those things happen. And yes, we can pick a needle out of a haystack and we can find some young high school players that were drafted in the 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th, 12th round. That is extremely difficult to do. And it's not a probable outcome. Therefore, teams aren't investing massive amounts of money in those players. Where they invest the money is in the top 2 or 3 rounds. So it's always very, very impressive to me, knowing the barriers to entry, to watch those high school players cross that threshold and get pulled off the board in the top 2 or 3 round. And for the high school players and for the high school families out there listening to this, understand that when a team does take you in the top, in the 1st, in the 2nd, maybe the 3rd round, and those bonuses are moving north of $1 million, essentially what that team is telling you is, we believe in you. You're going to play in the big leagues. Prove us wrong. And when you're a player selected a lot later, the message, it's not said, the message becomes a little bit, you're probably not going to play in the big leagues. Prove us wrong. So it's why it's so exciting when you see Rainier and you see Connor Griffin, and years past you get the Benny Montgomerys, and I took Khalil Watson and there's a lot of others, Colson Montgomery and so on, Anthony Volpe. It's really impressive to see these young players when they clear that barrier, because you know what that road looks like ahead of them.
That's a lot to unpack right there. And hopefully people are listening to that aspect of it. And I know from my sense, when putting together this list, now we have all our boots on the ground. There's so much information. Nobody has the type of information that we have. The backstory we're just talking about, something we'll hop into in a second with the collegiate national team. Background story on this guy. This is what he was like in high school. This is where it came from. The one thing, and tell me, DJ, when you put together your high school list, you have your high school guys. Last year, you take Noble Meyer, Thomas White. The list is probably a little bit bigger of, hey, these guys are not signing. There's some cross-offs here. These guys are going to school, which is to me why that 2023 class, this 24 class coming up, will have about 60 of the top 70 picks in the long run. right?
Mhm.
Whether it's high school or going off into college, there's going to be a good chunk of guys who get taken in those top 3 rounds.
Mhm.
So that's something we put into doing this list. Hey, these guys have a chance. Oh, this guy didn't even get dropped. Well, we're looking 3 years ahead. A guy I'm thinking about last year, Rock Kolowski. He's
Yeah,
UCLA.
really
Gavin
good shortstop.
Grohovac was a guy that we loved. He was higher on the board. Gavin Grohovac didn't even get drafted for 3 months. Oh, this guy's this high on your list. All of a sudden, Gavin Grohovac looks like a slam dunk first rounder after a season at A&M. So those are some things that go into this list. I do want to mention the fact that you are at the USA collegiate stuff right now. Asking you about some of the players on those teams. Who has stood out to you in that real quick? You had a quick glance. Who are some guys you saw?
Yeah, number one, the guy that jumps out, and it goes along exactly with what you're talking about, because I saw this player when he was in high school, Nolan Schubert. He's
Mhm.
hitting in the middle of the lineup for Team USA. He's blasting balls all over the place. He looks like I hate doing this, but I'm gonna do it. I don't like putting these expectations on players, but for the sake of our discussion, this looks like some combination of a Nolan Shanuel, who also wasn't drafted out of high school, surprise,
Mhm.
surprise, and goes right to the big leagues after being drafted out of Florida Atlantic. He looks like he's some combination of like a Freddie Freeman meets Nolan Shanuel.
Oh,
Why?
wow.
Because it's not super clean. You don't walk up to the ballpark and go, wow, that's a clean swing and all these kind of things. But he's a highly skilled hitter. He's extremely strong. He's got raw power. He's got an idea of the strike zone. And he's basically taken over this event. It's to the point now where Taipei won't even pitch to him.
Oh, geez.
So we're still early in the process. I don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be for Nolan. But the point of it is, and what you're talking about is, that was not a player that you can make a big investment in out of high school. And that's okay. That's why most high school players land on a college campus, because you have to inspire confidence in that major league team. And you've made this good point before. When you're dealing with a guy like Schubert, who's a corner guy, it doesn't matter if it's Grohovic who's playing third base, or it's Schubert who's playing in the outfield, or a guy playing first base. That bar to cross for a high school player is immense. And
Mm.
when they don't do it, they're probably going to fulfill a massive scholarship at a big university. And then they go on to become Nolan Shanuel. They go on to become Jack Caglione, and so on and so forth. And teams are very comfortable with that. That's why teams are actively hunting in the middle of the field. We'll talk about some of those players in a little bit. But guys like Schubert are really exciting. Another guy that I saw yesterday, didn't know who he was out of high school. I can only imagine what 6'9" looked like at 17 years old. So Gabe Davis comes out and he's throwing at 97. He's got a hammer breaking ball. It's like a slider, throws a plus changeup in the strike zone. That would have been very hard to pull off the board. I'm only imagining what that would have looked like when he was coming out of high school at 6'9". And there's other players as well. But this whole idea of going to college and becoming a guy, it's a real thing. And maybe it's that much more impressive when you are the high school player that teams want to sign out of high school, because you fulfill a lot of things.
You know what I find difficult from the scouting side? Because one, I want to ask you: is there some FOMO on these guys where, I was on that guy? I'm sure there's somebody out there in Oklahoma saying, I wanted to take Gabe Davis. Is there any FOMO in that?
Yeah. But you can't take them where you need to take them.
Mm.
That's the thing. It's not like you walk in, you see a high school player. I can't think of a guy that we've seen yet this year on the amateur circuit that's draft eligible next year. But if you would have walked in and saw like a Nolan Shanuel is a good example, or Jack Caglione, it's not that you stand in the ballpark and you say, I'm not really on that. What you say is, he goes in lane number 3. And I can assure you, lane number 3 is unsignable. Those players aren't signing for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. Because what you have to remember is they're getting a big scholarship to a big school. They're very good players. And number 2, teams are very, very nervous that the outcome often can go in the other direction.
Yes.
So for every 6'3" to 6'4" corner bat guy that becomes a Grohovic or a Nolan Schubert, a lot of them don't become that. That's why teams tend to want to hunt in the middle of the field. And if they are going to reach into the corner, it better look like Tristan Casas, right?
It's you never see the opposite side, right? So you don't get to see if we had taken Gabe, if we had taken Nolan Schubert.
That's
if he had
right.
come and struggled. You don't get to see that. All you see now is, oh man, this kid from Michigan, we weren't sure on. There was some swing and miss throughout his senior summer. Gavin Grohovac, there was some swing and miss throughout the senior summer. We actually had him mocked in the first round initially. I think he was 28, 30.
Mhm.
Felt like a very Yankees pick kind of. And now it very well may be. But you can't look at in that that hindsight of, hey, he actually would have gone off for us, because there's a really good
Yeah.
chance where he may not have.
Yeah, and you know what, Sheer, you have that perspective because of your background. I have that perspective because of my background, and everybody doesn't have that perspective. It's okay that some of these guys end up on a college campus and then become very good.
It's and not to mention the signability aspect of it, how much
Yeah.
these guys are looking for. Well, that's awesome to hear about those college guys. But let's dive into the draft board for us from the high school side. And keep in mind that there are going to be guys on this board in our top 100 going through that will not be drafted. There's a good chance that they will get to campus, and in 3 years, we're talking about these mega arms, top 10 picks. There's a good chance guys not on this list who are just below the threshold, because we'll talk about the right-handers and left-handers in this grouping. A lot of them are smushed together. You get into the right position, the right pitching coach, the right place where you're getting enough innings, enough at-bats, enough experience, enough summer ball work, a la Charlie Condon, his 300 at-bats in the Northwoods League. That's for another story.
Yo.
That stuff is all important. But at the top, Bryce Rayner's been our guy straight through. And I think the dust is kind of settled, and water has found its level, and Bryce Rayner's pretty good at baseball. That's kind of the feeling in the industry, but kind of what we've seen. I think he's got a chance to stick at shortstop. There's very Corey Seager-esque square shoulders. If you're truly dreaming on it in the top 10, you're almost hoping you get Corey Seager. This guy can run. He can play multiple positions. DJ, we've talked about in the past. If he really goes off and stinks, we have him right now as the number 2 right-handed pitcher in the class. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Along the same lines, Connor Griffin at number 2. Those 1, 2 are kind of at the top of the class. They separate themselves right now. They have a real strong chance of being top 10 picks. Connor Griffin reclassed from 25 to 24, a little bit younger, not too young though. I think he's like an 18-2, 18-3 at draft. So more at the young end of this 24 class. Can hit, run. He's one of those guys, DJ, hit tool's still coming around, can really run. There's a lot of unteachable about Connor Griffin. And it feels like there's value in that.
Yeah, I think so. You know, you and I have talked a lot about this, and this is what people need to understand. When you're pulling a player off the board at 2, at 3, sometimes even at 1, they're not perfect. They are not perfect. That's what people that aren't in this, we put these players on this pedestal and we lay these expectations out for players, and we need to understand that they're not perfect. So if you're a guy like a Connor Griffin where you need some polishing, or you're a guy like Rainier where the tools aren't necessarily off the charts, that's okay. Can the player play? Does the player have potential? And when you look at those 2 players specifically, it shouldn't be a surprise why they're at the top. They're right in the middle of the field. And when you're the best high school, let's throw tools out the window for a second. When you're just the best high school shortstop in the country, what does that say about your talent? You already separated yourself and you've put yourself in rarefied air. And that's very alluring to teams. So then when you get into some of the other stuff, how easy he plays the game, one of the things that stood about Bryce, the game was very, very easy. It was a low heartbeat. Things weren't very difficult for him. And that's a really good thing to say about a player, because as you know, this is a very difficult game. He makes it look easy.
Things did not speed up on him, which is why he's kind of stayed in this positioning, even with the bullseye in his back, had a great year.
Yeah.
This class, and you talked about in the college show, I hate hearing about it's not a good draft. It's not good. There is tons of value in this grouping. I think from those top 2 who are value definers, that they will kind of dictate what is their signing bonus. There is a drop-off, but these guys are still good. Cam Kamenetti, left-handed pitcher. Wyatt Sanford, Carter Johnson, 2 shortstop, left-handed bats. I would think that the industry probably is divisive on them. We had them up high. They're an intriguing case, especially Sanford and Johnson. The fact that they're SEC commits. I don't know what's going on with the NIL, but Wyatt Sanford's a Texas I think he's still a Texas A&M recruit. I don't want to misspeak, but with Mike Early staying there, hitting coach, there's a good chance he's staying there. I don't know how that affects things, but that's a guy that we respect the talent. We love the upside. Whether or not he's drafted this year, we think he's got a real strong chance of blossoming into that dude in the next few years. Ryan Sloan, who we've spoken to on this show, we think the world of, number one right-hander in the class, big time stuff, pounds the zone, makeup off the charts, 6'4", 225. I really think that back end of the first round is just screaming his name because he will not get into those supplemental picks. Theo Gillen and Will Schmidt actually just flip. Gillen, the position player, goes to 7. Will Schmidt goes to 8. The athleticism of Theo Gillen, I think he's one of those, DJ, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you've heard some buzz. He feels like the sleeper name in this draft where he could move up.
I think so. He's a guy where there's some positional, because of some of the injuries that he's had to endure, there becomes some positional question marks. I've seen him play the infield. I've seen him play the outfield. At the end of the day, let's not forget what we're drafting. You can hit or you can't hit. This is a bat competition here. So it makes him and he's very athletic. So that makes him a very alluring prospect.
It's a pretty swing. And some of those were freak injuries where he broke a leg, I think, something like that. I will say, for any scouting director who needs some ammo for a president, GM, there was a good chance that Theo Gillen was going to be the number 1 player in this class. Before he kind of went through those injuries, that guy was at number 2. He was on the trajectory. This profile, the way he runs, the way he swings, the impact, the hit power, this guy was going to be the number 1 player in the class. So it was all there.
Let me jump in there. To hear you say that, that's one of the things I like about prep baseball so much. And I've shared this with a lot of people. And kudos to you guys. Kudos to Sean and the people that have been here for much longer than me. You know so much about these players. I could have never made that statement. And it speaks to the depth of knowledge that you guys have and have had over the last 2 or 3 years to be able to make that statement, which is really impressive, and people should listen. I just talked to a scouting director about that the other day, about the amount of information that prep baseball has. So kudos to you guys.
And I think a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, the makeup of the player and the behind the scenes stuff, because we have such great data, but it's that hyper local facet that our scouts in the states, territories have, where we have a story like that. Theo Gillen's battling this right now. He's still growing into his frame. Will Schmidt was a guy who was crazy metrics. Alex Armand, our scouting director in Louisiana, he was playing on the C team of his travel program. And we're getting the data, the metrics, hey, this guy moves really well. He's spinning the heck out of it. It's low, but these power units that he's putting up here. Anyway, Cash Mayfield, another one who was not on the circuit last summer, blows up at the Super 60. We kind of eyed him for a while. He's going to get right, had a great year. Then we get the last guy in the top 10, PJ Morlando. And we talked about Schubart. Morlando feels more signable than what Schubart was at with his summer. Morlando has that impact ability. He's from South Carolina, was on the circuit, Team USA. Does that kind of help quell any issues positionally for a guy like that, where it's a Thunder's bat, left-handed hitter versus Schubart, northern hitter, cold weather, Michigan, see what he does in college?
Without a doubt. I think that's a good point. And Morlando's been around for a while. I believe he was an underclassman at a couple of the major events. And all he's done is hit. So what teams have to work through with a guy like Morlando, much like I was talking about Schubert, you don't walk in, lay eyes on Morlando and go, oh, he's going to rake, because he does it in a little bit different way. It's a little bit more spread out. Now, I haven't seen him recently, so maybe some things have changed, but it's just not as easy on the eyes. But the outcomes and what he does, let's not forget that he can rake. So the team that thinks that they can make some of those adjustments with him that are going to allow him to get to his in-game power, not his raw power. His raw power at the combine was really, really good from what I understand. So anybody that had a question about that, I think he answered it at the combine. But in terms of getting to the game power, he's going to have to make some adjustments. And there are organizations that are really confident in their offensive development plans that think they're going to be able to do that with him. So it provides a really good opportunity, not just for the player, but for the team to find some real good bat value down the board. So they get Nolan Schubert, or they get Caglione, or they get Condon before he becomes Condon. Yeah. And then he's out of range for most teams. The teams at the back of the first round are thinking this way. They do not have access. The Yankees, the Phillies, the Rays, the Diamondbacks, and so on, the Rangers, they don't have access to Condon, and they want him just as bad as the Reds want him. So they're going to do everything they can to find that guy before he becomes him.
It's interesting you say that because a lot of times when I'm looking at the back of the first round, what they're going for, hey, we can get this, substantial war, but not a superstar. A lot
Mhm.
of those teams you just spoke of, hey, we can buy a fourth outfielder. We somebody else will develop that for us. We what we're trying to get here is, hey, Mike Trout's at 23, whatever he went.
That's
How do we
right.
get that guy?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that we've talked about this before. It's usually going to be the bat, and it's not going to usually be comfortable. I'll say that again. It's going to be driven by the bat, and it's not going to be comfortable. If it was comfortable, you wouldn't have access to that player. If it was comfortable, the Padres don't sniff James Wood, who made his major league debut last night. I remember that conversation vividly. I've done a lot of research in this, and it's going to be uncomfortable because there's a little bit of a positional issue. He's going to be a corner guy, not James Wood specifically, but a lot of these players we're talking about. And you have to be willing to do it. I wonder how they felt when they pulled Freddie Freeman off the board in the second round. I saw him in Double-A. That was not easy on the eyes. It's a funky swing. It doesn't look right. It's not loose and easy. Now, Freddie Freeman turned out to be okay. So teams have to be willing to do it.
And it's something we put together with this list. It's something we consider. Hey, well, we've seen this track record. I mean, even go back to last year, Aiden Miller was hurt throughout the spring. There's a little bit of movement throughout the swing pattern early on. Guy, is he going to be that dude? Aiden Miller's off to a pretty good start. He's doing okay for the Phillies, but to fall down there and make that decision, that was a really good job by them. But I think going through this list, we go through 11 to 20. There are going to be guys that are going to campus. Look, and Johnny King, Tyler Bell, 11, 12. We think the world of these guys. They have huge upside. Johnny King having the chance to talk to him and understand that, hey, I thought that the ceiling was here. The ceiling is actually up here. This guy can get even better. But that's something in the immediacy of what he did throughout the summer. There may be some teams where, hey, we just can't take him at 15. We can't take him at 12. But in 3 years, you may not have a chance to get him at 15 or 12.
That's right. And it's the same deal with a guy like Johnny King as it might be with one of those hitters that we're talking about. You have to be willing to pull it. You have to be willing to do it. And sometimes they go to school. The other thing we've talked about before that we haven't touched on yet here is one of the things that the organizations are thinking about is this a good fit for us? Everything has to line up from how talented the player is to how much the scouting department likes him. And also, does the organization think it's a good fit for them? If that player has some deficiencies, and I said 10 minutes ago, every single player has a deficiency. I don't care if it's JJ Weatherholt, who we got to think a little bit about keeping his hamstrings healthy, or it's Nolan Shanuel, who I wonder what that power is going to be. These are some of the best players in the country that have issues, and you need to address. Teams are addressing right now whether or not they think they can help whatever issue it is, and if they can't, then you're eliminating a team. That's why the fit has to be perfect.
It really is. So the intricate details of what go into this, especially from the high school side where there's so much talent. And then for me, what keeps me up nights are which guys are we going to miss on who are going off to college, who then go there and develop. But the two late pushes that I want to kind of talk about are guys that we followed throughout, I'd say over the last year. Huge names that we've kind of been behind following. They spent the spring continuing to grow. But Tyson Lewis, who's a shortstop out of Nebraska, and then I'll just call him an athlete, Luke Dickerson, hockey player, hockey tough, New Jersey kid, who actually tied Mike Trout's home run record in the state of New Jersey. But those two guys, I think there's going to be considerable buzz late. When I got to see Dickerson, I would say this is probably about as high as I can get on a guy, in the sense that I went back in New Jersey to see him the second time. That's how much I like them. And usually, right, I got to see this guy, that guy. I'm going to see this part. We're driving over. We're going to go to Philly, head up to New England. No, it was circle. Like, I need to go back and see Luke Dickerson a second time. So that's kind of the high mark for me in having to go see him a second time. I don't know if he sticks at shortstop, if he's a second baseman, if he's a center fielder or left fielder. I think the bat's going to play. The power's going to come along. It's a blue-collar kid who just plays the game at full tilt, was on the barrel all spring. What I loved about him, though, and I would love to check out any S2 cognition that he has, his takes were outstanding.
Yeah.
The hands were back. He was ready to fire. Even on breaking balls that he took down the middle, he was ready to go. And for a cold weather kid who came off a state championship run in hockey to be able to do that with the bullseye on his back, I've seen lots of Jersey kids, obviously. This was different.
There you go again with Jersey.
It's
I have to check you on that, right?
You do, and you should continue to do it. But while we got a couple in here, I'll keep doing it. Tyson Lewis, on the other hand.
Right.
Tyson Lewis, PDP last summer, USA. Who is this kid? This swing is right. There's some thunder in these hands. That barrel's coming around. All this stuff looks good. Is he going to defend? Is he going to stick at shortstop? I don't know if I can name a single shortstop from the state of Nebraska who's stayed there. Can you?
I can't. And I think you bring up a good point there.
That's not to say it won't happen, but at 6'3", 6'4", 210, 6'4" runner with about 108 to 110 exit velocities, this guy's going to find his way on the field somewhere because he's an absolute athlete. Really performed throughout the spring. Now, yes, it's cold weather baseball, whatever you may say. You still got to go out and hit. And there's a lot of guys who have a ton of talent who don't perform. He did what he had to do. I still think the upside is through the roof.
Yeah, and Shooter, you said something there about when I think about evaluating this talent, you go out in the summertime and you see these players and you put numbers in boxes, put all these fancy numbers the scouts put in their boxes, and that gets the ball rolling. But the further down the path you go to an actual selection, what you just said is important, and people don't realize this. Everything is being scrutinized to try to understand what the best possible outcome is going to be. Talk to me about high school players signed out of Nebraska. Talk to me about the probabilities of high school players signed out of New England or the Mid-Atlantic. Do you have a better chance in Virginia and Jersey and Pennsylvania than you do out of high school players in New York, and so on and so forth? So there's a lot of things that get discussed that go way beyond the talent. I know I joke with you on the Jersey thing, but I'm like you. I really do like Northern players. I was willing to take Jacob Miller. I was all on board. I wasn't working with the Yankees at the time, but I was at Vanderbilt when we did Anthony Volpe. You knew what Anthony Volpe was going to become because you knew not just the talent, but the type of person and family and support network he came from. We did Thomas White. We did Joe Mack, who's slowly emerging into a top 100 prospect, breaking out this year. So there's a lot of value to be had by some of these Northern players. Dickerson's interesting. People don't know my background. I love hockey. I was a hockey guy for a long time, boarding school, the whole deal. People that are around me know there's something. He's a two-sport athlete.
Yes.
He's a two-sport athlete. Joe Mack was a two-sport athlete.
There are high school coaches and travel ball coaches who are so excited to hear you say that. Parents right now, you're a hockey guy. I'm a hoops guy. So it's bringing together all the two sport kids. But those two guys are kind of me. Hey, we start getting to 25. There's some interesting. If that came off the board, we'll be sitting on live and going, "Yep, those guys knew what they got, and they were keeping it close to the vest." And he just came off the board.
So listen to this one. You're back there, and no, I didn't pick in the first round as a scouting director at 25, but I did have comp picks, and it's the same idea. So just because we had already taken a player up at 4, 5, 16, we still got to pick and had to have that feeling of what it's like back in that part of the draft. And what a lot of these teams are experiencing, a lot of these scouting directors, what they're experiencing is that players are moving to them that make sense. And what they have to be very conscious of is sometimes some of the bigger mistakes I've made were taking the player that made sense instead of taking the player that I really wanted. And when you look at a guy like Dickerson, or you said Bell, and it could be a number of guys, it maybe Sloan's your guy. Instead of getting overly concerned about, oh, he's a high school pitcher. If you love that player, if you want that player, don't settle for what makes sense. Take the player you want. You'll sleep a lot better at night.
I can only imagine looking back and saying, I wanted this guy. I took this safe one. Let me ask you something.
Let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an example. Joe Mack. Do you think it was easy for me to pull a high school catcher at 31 or 32? Do I need to get into what the outcomes are for a high school catcher, let alone a high school catcher from Buffalo, New York? When's the last time a high school player has come out of Buffalo, New York?
Oof.
and achieved what we want them to achieve. So it took a lot of work. It took me going up and watching that kid play volleyball multiple times. It took interviews with other people.
Wow.
It took a lot of effort to get over that hurdle. But when you get, it's like freeing when you get over the hurdle and you go, yeah, you know what? I know it's not super tooled up, but I think we're just going to take Anthony Volpe. I love this kid. And look what they got. You know, and no, Joe Mack, I couldn't tell you. I'm using this as a very specific example because it's a hurdle that I had to clear, and we had to keep stress testing. Not only are we taking the high school catcher, we're taking the high school catcher from New York. That's tough.
Yeah, not from the city or Westchester. You were taking them from
upstate. Buffalo, right? So you have to do that, though. And those are sometimes your most rewarding picks.
Let me ask you, because you did take Joe Mack, 31. Like, sometimes the way I look at those supplemental picks, right? All of a sudden the first round ends and a new first round begins, right?
Ooh,
Thomas White, who we
like
would have on the board, you essentially got the 15th best talent at 34. And what I think the way that I view it is, hey, the guys we're going to take here, whether it's a Charlie Soto or whoever it may have been, especially arms, we are getting this guy who we think might be a top 10 pick in 3 years at a half price discount, essentially. That's who we're going at. J.R. Ritchie,
Right.
Jacob Miller,
Right.
Jackson Cox. These are the guys we're going to get. Or a guy that we can't get that we're going to grab 26 through 30. So you can throw 26 through 40 in there. Is that a way to look at it? This is almost the second first round. These are more first rounders. I've
never thought of that, and I like that. Because what that does is it thinking about it that way encourages the urgency to make a great selection. This is our second first round pick. I'm going to put myself out there for a second to give you some perspective about what this feels like. Joe Mack was number 17 overall on our board. Now, I'm only going back to Joe Mack because that was a very difficult selection for the reasons that I outlined. He was number 17 on our board. Harry Ford was a good prospect in Georgia, a high school catcher. I want to say Harry Ford was 41 or 42 on our board. We were clearly out. He went 12 to the Mariners. How do you think that made us feel when Mac got to 31 and we said, wow, that guy that we had at 42, we're going to get our 17th best player on the board. Now, we probably undersold Harry Ford. That's going to happen. But I can assure you this, if you try to get every single player right, you're not going to get any of them right. You have to be willing to sacrifice players. Other teams are going to get good players, and that's okay. If you and I are picking in order, in line, if you get a good player, that's all right. I'm just worried about me, my team. Do we select a good player? Because you're not going to get them all. You can't get them all. So very, very important. I love the way you just said that.
I say it a lot with recruiting classes, and then it would make sense with your draft class too, right? If your pocket got picked every time, right? Say you went through 20 rounds, pocket picked, you're still going to like your draft class, right? You're not going to say, oh, that class stunk, and just kind of walk away from those guys. That's why you evaluate all the talent and get those good ones.
That's right.
But moving over kind of to some things that we've moved forward with, rather than that 1 through 500 list, which makes zero sense in looking towards a war room. Positional value. So looking at the high school, top shortstops, top outfielders, corner guys, catchers, right-handed pitchers, left-handed pitchers. You've been instrumental in helping through that process. It's enlightening to go through, and it's a different view of things with the draft. So you look at the shortstops, it's a lot of future value to me, not a lot of, hey, we got the full 2019 class here. We're just rolling through, making it easy. So that's something I saw with the shortstops. You even throw in Tyson Lewis, who's a riser for us, who I think has a really good chance to go in those top 40 picks. If not, I'm maybe way low on that. Kellen Lindsay, who might be the most polarizing guy in the entire country, not in the summer circuit. Nobody saw him. Talk about just more so that sense. This is a kid from the state of Florida. That is as talent dense as it gets. And nobody knew about this kid. I know. I think there were some injuries involved. And truth be told, I don't know anything
about Kellen Lindsay outside of what I heard. And if you're ever in a team spot, in a team situation, and you actually have to make a selection, that becomes very, very difficult. Not Kellen Lindsay, okay, not Kellen Lindsay specifically, but the player that you don't know a lot about. In those situations, that's where teams are going to lean right into their comfort. Well, we know more about Wyatt Sanford, or we know more about. That's why the summer stuff. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, the day before, when we were talking about summer scouting, fall scouting, the track record. Kudos to the Padres for pulling Jackson Merrill off the board that high. No East Coast Pro, no area code games. They had the information from some of their summer events that they went to. We did not. The Miami Marlins did not. That was a COVID year. We didn't have a scout in the area. So you can imagine how I felt when we got to April and that player just pops up and we hear his name. It's not smart. Did I miss? Yes, I missed. But the decision not to plow into a player that you don't have a lot of information on, that's probably the better decision. And you just tip your cap to the other team. They will get good players. So the team that pulls Kellen Lindsay, they probably have a lot more information than the other team. And therefore, they're more comfortable. And kudos to them.
Very interesting in Florida. But beyond him, Owen Pano's a guy kind of moved up where he did not have the great summer. I thought he had a chance to have a breakout performance there. More of a push for us, I would say, collegiately. That's a guy I think has a chance to go to Ole Miss and really develop into that Jacob Gonzalez type first-round talent.
You know what's interesting when you say that name? And you can speak to this more than me. Owen Pano was a name as a young kid, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. He was a guy. And it creates this expectation. And I'm gonna say Nolan Schubert, because I stood with an agent 3 years ago. And we stood at the USA and we watched this young, gangly kid from Michigan hit. And I remember the people, the prep baseball people, or the agents who are recruiting and scouting the players at a much younger age. I remember he said, oh, man, that guy can really hit. Now, this was an agent that I really respect. And I watched him and I was like, really? And he didn't really hit. So he goes to college. And at the end of the day, guess who's right? The agent knew it. He knew him at a young age. The prep baseball scouts that saw the player at a young age. That's what Owen Pano. I don't know what's going to happen with Owen Pano. He might end up in Oxford, and Carl Lafferty and Mike Bianco might get one heck of a player. Jacob Gonzalez. I remember Jacob Gonzalez. He was a good hitter. He was a football player from California, Glendora, California. Shows up at Ole Miss. He can really hit.
It's interesting that the Gonzalez, because that was a top 50 guy for us. Jacob Gonzalez coming out of California. Oh, how did this guy get the campus? It just happens because
it just happens
here. Pano could be the same way. JD Dix was the guy we moved on to here.
Oh, yeah.
Now JD Dix, we keep talking about these cold weather guys. Wisconsin kid, another one who had a chance, was a top 10 prospect in the class. Some injuries. I think the injuries will be something guys are looking at. But the kid's an absolute winner. Switch hitter, plays hard, knows the game. So I think he is one of those hidden value guys early on day 2 that you may hear that name come off, if not earlier, because the guys who scouted him the previous 2 years before he had to deal with some stuff, that guy's talent is through the roof too.
That's the player that I don't know very well. And when I hear you talk, I'm like, who's this Dix guy? This kid, to me, if you're in the scouting world and you're in it every day, this is the one where it's hard for you to pull it. But when your buddy pulls it, you pick up the phone and you call him and you say, wow, you did that. Good for you. Good for you. That guy can rake. So that's a really interesting one. Again, going down that cold weather narrative, that player sounds very, very interesting to me. I wish I would.
Checking out those guys, those are the shortstops, which there's going to be a lot of talent there, right? Obviously, in 3 years, at least how many? 4 of these guys will be first rounders. Somebody from this class in 3 years on campus, they will be there. And it doesn't mean just these top 15 that we have here. There's a chance that a guy goes off, gets a ton of playing time. He turns into a dude, goes to Team USA, goes to Cape Cod, does his thing, goes to the draft league. Catching wise, this is not your Harry Ford, Joe Mack class.
Doesn't feel like it.
We've already spoken about the value in high school catching, what you and I more specifically value. I would say there's a majority of 4 to 6. So rounds 4 to 6, which is where these guys are, which to me would be, there's a good chance these guys are going off to college. Now at the top, Anderson French, who's like 10 sports star in high school.
Yes.
Cerebral kid, outstanding, left-handed hitter, square shouldered. There's a lot to buy in on. Pittsburgh area kid, cold weather. Did he get enough eyes on him? We'll see. Hunter Carnes, Florida kid, some swing and miss there, crazy bat speed, really athletic. He's at the top with French, along with Caden Arambide, who had, I mean, shoot, I've never seen so many scouts videoing a kid's work behind the plate and his defensive ability behind the dish. When I saw it, it was not anemic, as many people are saying, this guy can't catch. I was not buying into that. I think he was fine. There's a chance he could develop. We'll see what happens with that. Obviously, it's a plus arm strength. You're buying into the right-handed power at the plate, but I don't know. Right-handed catcher, high school, some swing and miss. We're a little concerned about defensive behind the plate. That screams more third or fourth round for a guy at this top end.
Sure. Team, different positions, different profiles have different hurdles, different bars to clear. It's pretty obvious what we're talking about with catching. It's a very, very high bar to clear. What's interesting about catching is when you look across the major leagues, and part of the reason why it's hard to pull Joe Mack and it's hard to pull Harry Ford is because when you look in the major leagues, a lot of those catchers, their last name is Hernandez or Gomez. There's a lot of Venezuelan, Latin American, Puerto Rican catchers that emerge in the big leagues, number one. And number two, there's a lot of conversion guys. And number three, a lot of them are taken further down the draft board. So when teams start to put their boards together and they ask this or that, that's what you like to say, this or that. I like to say this or that, or this and that. So you can replace Joe Mack's name with Ben Rortvort, who was taken in the fourth, fifth round or sixth round or wherever he was taken out of Wisconsin, or the name is slipping my mind right now. The guy that was taken out of Indianapolis years ago, I believe the Reds took him, and the Reds have done a great job with high school catching. AJ Persinski went in the third round, but the key is you have to find the Aaron Beebe, or you have to find, who was another name that you said,
Carnes.
Carnes, or our boy from Pittsburgh, Anderson French. You got to find the one that'll sign in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth round, which is very hard to do. But that's why teams would much rather, a lot of times, teams will just eliminate the high school catcher, just like they're going to eliminate a high school pitcher. The Orioles have not poured into high school pitching because they don't believe in it, which is fine. That's not a problem. They're doing a good job with hitting. Teams will eliminate things.
The other interesting thing about this catching class, and more pertinent to right now, is the college catching class. Right, this is a really good college crew, right, in 24.
That's right.
So you're looking at some of these guys down this list of high school have a chance in 3 years. We're going to be blowing them up. There's a Yannick's on here. Oh, there's a Cozart on here. So that's the other thing to look into. There's a ton of potential, but what's difficult for the team is to say, oh yeah, no, this guy's going to turn into Yannick. Right? How do you look back and say he would have been that?
People don't know this name yet. Or Brooks Bryan. Or Bodine. Yep. I just watched Team USA. Seif was down in here watching Team USA. Both of the catchers that are here, I don't know what they were in high school.
Well, obviously,
be good.
Jersey kid, so I knew all about him.
You said Bodine. Yeah, so you knew Bodine. Brooks Bryan was from somewhere around, I think he was from Opelika, or he was Auburn or something. He lands at Troy State. But the point well taken, you don't know if Anderson French is going to turn into one of these kind of guys.
So, and you won't get the chance to look back and say, oh, this is what he would have been. But anyway, moving on to the outfield crew, which is really good. What's unique about this outfield group, and talk to me about this, DJ. So number two are outfield, honestly, number one, Connor Griffin, kid who probably played mostly shortstop all year. Theo Gillen, who did play shortstop all year at Westlake, go Chaps, down in Austin. And then Luke Dickerson at number 5. A lot of these guys who played infield, what goes into calling a kid's name as a position? Answer that question. And then also, how do you evaluate a guy who didn't really play the spot that you think he's going to play?
Those are two really good questions.
That's why you're on the hot seat.
Optics. Looks good to call a shortstop. It looks good to call a catcher. It looks good to call a center fielder. Okay. We know, the one thing we know is that major league front offices, and this will lead into that second question you asked me. Major league front offices are more creative than ever. I would have never said J.J. Bleday was going to be playing center field in the big leagues. He was big. He was strong. He had great instincts. He moved well, but he didn't run like a center fielder. Well, he's running around playing center field for the Oakland Athletics. Aaron Judge is playing center field for the New York Yankees. Okay. So this whole landing spot for positions is very, very difficult to predict. So teams will give players chances. It's why when you go out and you see a scout and you say, is he going to be a shortstop? And you'll hear something like, no, but I would send him out as a shortstop just to see, just to develop him there. What was your second question?
So the calling of the team, and then how do you evaluate a kid, especially in high school, who didn't play the position?
There you go. That's a good question. And I think we talked yesterday about Jared Thomas. Why can't Jared Thomas, right? Yeah, from Texas. Why can't Jared Thomas play center field? If Blade can do it, if Judge can do it, they never played that position in college. Why can't Jared Thomas? And if you're willing to do it for a center, I might not have said that 10 years ago because teams weren't as creative. Front offices weren't as creative. Information wasn't as readily available. The advanced scouting reports are remarkable now. The defensive positioning to overcome things that we think may have been more important. In the case of outfielders, speed. We can overcome a lot of that stuff to get the best bat in the lineup and not sacrifice too much defense. So that's probably the way you would do it. How do you do it? It's athleticism and feel for the game and the instincts, and does the player move well like a Blade or a guy like Thomas who we know can run. I mean, Thomas, what do he take 17, 18 bags this year? So you gotta piece some of that stuff together and ask yourself, do you think does he have a chance to play another position?
It's so in look at this outfield crew, and it's a group of 15 that we have on here. I think the bundles and the this or that aspect going into the draft is something that a lot of teams are going to be asking themselves. We have Orlando at 3, Braylon Payne from Houston at 4. Now, those are two different guys, outfielders, who bring different value to the game, which a lot of it's dependent on what your organization values. What can you develop, especially? What are we trying to buy? We're trying to buy what we can't teach. How do we get that intrinsic value? So those two, I think, are a very interesting this or that.
I think that's a really good one. And, who would have thought, look at Mike Elias and Sig in Baltimore. Look at what they pulled off the board when they were in Houston. They weren't pulling speed. They were pulling bat, and they were pulling middle of the field, hitters, power, right down that road. That's the only reason why you pulled Judd Fabian. And they pulled Enrique Bradfield. Pure speed. Why did the Dodgers pull Kendall George last year? Speed. The game's changing. You got to evolve with the game. And that's what made those players maybe a little more appealing than in previous years to teams that might not have taken that. So I think your question on Orlando versus, you said Braylon Payne, two very different types of players. You have to ask yourself as an organization, what are we into here? What's the draft? How much do we like those two players? Is there any separation between how much we like them? And if they're very, very close, then it becomes a question of, can we get if we pass on Payne and his athleticism and his speed, will Kellen Lindsey be there for us in the next round? Or it could be a college guy, so they can get this and that.
Well, it's interesting you say that this and that. So if we pass on Payne, there are a grouping of guys that are right there. Slade Caldwell, Arkansas product.
Yeah.
Dante Nori, guy you saw up in Michigan. Griff Burkhalter, Virginia kid.
Yeah.
So tons of value there. Guys, we love these players. The difference between Caldwell and Nori is another this or that.
Yeah.
Caldwell's on the barrel. He took some of the best swings I saw all summer. He is 5'5". And from the state of Arkansas. So, there will be concerns there. And, if you don't take – it's one of those – if we don't take him, the Arkansas kid, he's 5'5". But you do take him, you say, that's the best swing I saw all summer.
That's exactly right. It's like when you called your buddy and you say, man, I can't believe you took him. Good for you. It's the scout that passes Drew Burress, right? Drew Burress isn't very big. Let's go back to this Team USA thing. He's not very big. He's a right-handed hitting center fielder. That's a tough profile. A small right-handed hitting center fielder. So when that player's coming out of high school and you're thinking about the outcomes, do people like Drew Burress? Of course they do. Who doesn't like the way that kid plays? He's always been a good player. But he ends up at Georgia Tech for those reasons. And then 1 year later, you're watching him out here run around for Team USA, banging balls all over the place. And you go, oh, we should have taken him. So that's the whole Slade Caldwell thing. He's got a good swing. You know, who's the shorter player out of, and people are more open-minded than ever to do those kind of things. It's slipping my mind. Dallas, Texas, small infielder.
Jet
Short.
Williams.
There you go.
Jet Williams.
The Mets took the Jet.
Yep.
You know, so
it is interesting that there are definitely a lot of this or that's with this outfield group. I'm excited to see what happens. Kind of one of my, I could say personal favorites, but like I love the way he goes about it. And we talked about Jared Thomas. There are some similarities. Kid tie head from Florida. Is the bat going to be impactful? Well, there are some intricate things that he does at the plate. Hits left-handed, chance to play center field, probably similar to the guys you're talking about. He's not going to play center. Well, there's a good chance he actually does because of his athleticism. The speed's not plus, but that's probably one of our pushes. So just to throw a couple more, Sawyer Stroh-Snyder, who's one of the freakier athletes in this class. I think he could come off the board early because of the dynamic things that he can do. And then Jay Souza and Titus Sissel are super 60 guys for us. Metrics, there's a lot of stuff. I think some teams who are heavy model teams, data, there may be a chance those guys dive in there too.
You know what, Shooter, as you're talking, I was thinking about some of these names that you're throwing out, and we know a lot of players end up on a college campus. We can talk about some really intricate, detailed, over-the-top metrics, and we can talk about tools, and we can talk about how a major league scouting report gets put together. But sometimes we want to just simplify it. What scouts are trying to prevent when they pull a high school player off the board? You know what a real bad feeling is? Showing up at Vanderbilt or LSU or Alabama or UCLA, and you watch that freshman walk out on the field and you go, oh man. That's what you're trying to prevent, because you can see it right away. And you immediately ask yourself, how did we let this happen? It's not like the player just exploded in 4 months. 5 months. You weren't watching him in May or June. You pass on him in the draft, and then he shows up at Scout Day in September, and he's all of a sudden a guy. So teams are working really, really hard to prevent that. That's a tough feeling. And I've had that happen before, where you say, how in the heck did this guy end up on a college campus? Why didn't I have the resolve or the conviction to just pull it? I knew it. And I'm sure you, because of your track record with these players and some of our scouts, you're going to watch some players go to college this year and go, watch, just wait. You're going to see what that kid's going to become.
And you know what's interesting? You say, one, you have to be a little bit happier that nobody else took him. So at least I get to see him here in college. And have
Right.
The other thing we'll hear is this guy turned down $1.5 million, right? Especially for arms, those high-end arms who, hey, are going to the SEC, whatever big conference they're going to. If you're the dude there, there's a chance you're a top 5 pick, right? That's what the coach is going to sell. How much did Paul Skeens sign for? Close to $10 million.
Right.
So go have fun in Baton Rouge for a year, and you just made yourself, 5x what you could have gotten.
That's exactly right.
So, but moving over to those pitchers, we'll start with the lefties first, because the right-handers can be so divisive, and it's, I think, the most depth in this entire draft. Caminiti, Mayfield, Johnny King. Those are the top 3 for us. Caminiti, I think the youth is one of those big things for him. The reclass, the arm strength's there. The breaking ball is going to be something people are calling into question. Where does he go?
Right.
A lot of that breaking ball stuff, though, and he had a fantastic year. And if you get him in an interview, he is going to crush it. Everything about him screams, this kid's a big leaguer. Can you devalue a kid where, like, hey, we want him at 19, 20, 21, but they're talking about him at 13, 14. All of a sudden, you're just mixing around the crowd. Would you ever say that to an area guy? Yeah, why don't you just start saying, have you seen him throw a changeup yet? You see how he's rolling out his shoulder with the lacrosse ball between innings?
Yeah.
He's not giving any tricks away.
Right. I think with the high school pitching, you just have to have your checklist of what you believe in. And I know that sounds really, really simple, and you have to be resolved to believe in it. And your organization has to be ready for it. I have put my money where my mouth is. I'm ready for it. I really believe strongly in our checklist, and it was stringent. It's not like we would have 10 or 15 high school pitchers on the board targeted to take. We might have 2 or 3.
Ooh.
I remember in 2022, it was Jacob Miller, and it was Porter, and it was I want to say Jackson Ferris may have been in that group. J.R. Ritchie, Owen Murphy. I misspoke on one of our previous episodes. I said Owen White, who was from Charlotte, went to the Rangers. I was speaking about Owen Murphy, who the Braves took, who was really good. But you have a very small group, and they should each, Carson Milbrandt, we took that year. They should share some common attributes. They don't all have to be the same, but they have to be things that you really, really believe in. And if not, you can just let them go to school. Ian Snell, not Ian Snell. Ian Snell, Blake Snelling from Nevada, from Reno, really good. So, but the list isn't very, very long. And when you see a guy, you mentioned Caminiti, we got a breaking ball problem, right? Okay. I mentioned it before. Weatherholt has a hamstring problem. Caglione's just plays first base. They've all got issues, right? Can you and your organization, can you and your develop, have you dove into this whole Caminiti breaking ball thing? And can you break the code? Can you help him with, because if you can, now you've got a really good makeup kid who can really throw the ball and on and on and on. He's young and all that kind of stuff.
He's going to find a way, which is why he's at number 1. One of the other risers, another prep baseball American, Dasson Hill, Dallas kid, huge year, up in the upper 90s. Breaking ball's always been there. Another kid who's not afraid. Boston Bateman's just ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has a chance to be the guy everybody's kind of whispering on. To me, there's just a lot of unteachable. He's 6'7", strong arm, high slot, tunnels a big breaking ball. He has 2 pitches that have a chance to be plus. He's got the frame. If you can develop that into a starter, that guy seems to have a ton of value. So I'm sure some teams are looking at him. David Shields, obviously on here. The mono set him back. I thought he had a chance to really jump up this. He's sitting at a place where if we're looking in 3 years and he made the campus, hey, there's a chance that this guy rose up, into higher ranks, if not this year. And then Blake Larson, IMG kid from the state of Iowa, kind of been a roller coaster with him. Strikes, what's here, what's not. When I look at him, it's very similar to Paul Wilson from last year.
Good one, yeah.
And there's some issues here, but there's a whole lot of unteachable athleticism and things that if we get into our system and if we know we can develop it, this guy talent-wise is a top 15 pick. I mean, it's that type of arm talent, two-way guy. So this left-handed group, really good. A lot of differing details where organization to organization, what they value, and especially what they can develop will come into play. And then shifting over to the right-handers, because I've just been saving this. It's the Medius group. This is where the most depth is, DJ.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about it before on the show, if not offline. How many of these guys can we get? Because what is it? Quantity has a quality all to its own.
Love it. Yes. I love the way you say that. And it's true for high school pitching.
And I think there's a lot of depth. Even we put out a top 25 list. I would say looking at the list, about 20 through 50 are essentially the same guy on boards. So there are 25 names not on here who are ultra good, have a chance to blow up in college, if not get taken above these guys, because that's the type of talent that this right-handers have. And it's more in the middling. It's not like pushing into the top 10. There's no Jackson Jobe. There's no Noble Meyer. I would say Rayner's probably the most step below similar Noble Meyer type. But at the top, Sloan, Rayner, who we have at 2, and Schmidt. Those are explosive guys. Then you go into a group of, hey, these guys are similar. How did we scout them? Who do I trust? I'm sure, DJ, which scout can I lean on the most? Joey Oki, Iowa product.
Yeah.
Strikes come and go. It's electric stuff. Trey Alford has played in real small Colorado Springs high school. Not a great team. What did we see? Is it a reliever profile? There's some effort there. To me, he's 6'4", 230 and moves like that with 3+ pitches. It's uncomfortable to be at the plate. We don't need it to look super smooth.
Comes from a state that has produced high school pitching.
Yes, and less track record. I mean, or less miles on it. Chris Lavonis, who we've seen a ton of, Braylon Doty, Bryce Message. Those 3 are in a grouping. How do we separate these guys? What's the value in it? Can we get this guy for less? All of a sudden, one jumps above the other because he costs $500,000 less. So this is kind of the order we have. Levi Sterling was a kid after last summer, super young, really good athlete, did not have the spring that many, including us, thought he would have. I still think the ceiling is super high. I think he's got a chance to really develop, whether that's professionally or collegiately, we'll see. But DJ, more than any other group, the this versus that, and it's not even just one guy versus two. It's, hey, we have 10 guys on here. How do you factor that into going to your war room? Hey, we have all these high school right-handers. Mm-hmm. You're going to put them in order, I'm assuming, when you go into your war room, like we have. And then you're just crossing off signability guys. What goes on?
Well, I think that circling back to what you said, I really liked the idea of quantity has a quality unto itself. You know, and you look at what happened to the Marlins pitching staff this year. They don't have a really good offensive team, and their pitching staff was decimated right out of the chute. You got to have a lot of arms. When you start talking pitching with where we are with arms, you have to have a lot of arms. The quantity is important. And when you're starting to select them, whether you're in a major league front office or you're in a draft room for a major league team, you have to be willing to make that commitment. Pittsburgh's made that commitment over the years. The Braves have made that commitment over the years. If you try to pick a needle out of the haystack, you're putting yourself at a significant disadvantage because so many things can go wrong with just that one player. Okay. I would say the same thing if you were really into taking power bats. You can't just take one. And yes, I loved what Seif said the other day about a balanced portfolio, but that balanced portfolio might be a high school left-hander with a couple high school right-handers. One of the things that I really believe in, and I'm not avoiding your question, one of the things I really believe in is taking multiple high school players together. If you're taking some position players, if you're taking some pitchers, let those players come in. You play professional baseball. I've been around professional baseball for a long time. Let those players come in and have a peer group. Let them have somebody that they can identify with. What do you think it's like for Thomas White and Jacob Miller and Noble Meyer and Carson Milbrandt to throw their bullpens together? They're all in Beloit. To develop together, to lift together. Rising tides can lift all boats. So I really like this concept of drafting multiple. If, to your question, you have 10 high school right-handed pitchers on the board and you're having a hard time separating them, number one, you might eliminate some guys just based on TrackMan. I'm just lobbing that out there. Yep. Some teams will not do Jacob Miller. It's not a dead zone fastball, but it was obvious. Jacob Miller didn't have a lively fastball. We decided to take him. So whatever your speed is as a team, you have to find some checkpoints and guardrails to eliminate players. Then if you had that list of 10 that you threw out there, if you can find 3 or 4 of them, you've got to attack. And you've got to find a way to either manipulate your draft but you have to dive in on a couple of them and try to get them. Maybe some guy you can push down to the 3rd round and give a bunch of money to and be willing to sacrifice. Again, I hate saying this because I am a big player advocate, but punt a couple picks in the 8th or the 9th round so that you might have the money for a Carson Milbrandt or something like that. Mason Albright, by the way, you mentioned David Shields. I was just with Mason Albright's agent the other day, and we were talking about him. I specifically remember Albright carving dudes up in high school. Somebody took the plunge for $1 million or $1.2 million, and he's really, really good.
Is
he's
he
not
doing
a velocity
well?
guy. He's doing really well.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and he was a pitchability guy. So you have to decide what your speed is, eliminate the noise, and attack the group that you want to attack.
It's and just to add onto this specific group, because of what we're talking about and the depth of it and how similar a lot of the talent level is it right to assume these guys could shift down? Because, hey, there's not many shortstops. We need to grab position player,
Sure.
right? We're already examining that. We might be able to get Dax Whitney from Idaho in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
Who's been a huge riser for us, was a pro case standout last summer for us.
That's right.
We can get that late. We can get, this guy's slightly worse, but maybe we have this much money to work with, and that fits into this. Do we like it here? Yes, we like it there.
That's right. So that player that was in the comp round, you might say he's disguised as Dax Whitney in the 3rd round. We'll just take him there.
Yes.
So you really have to be able to eliminate some things that bug you. I think that's a key thing. And it's hard for organizations to do because they want to be right. But like I said earlier, you can't be right on every player. You're going to make mistakes. You just have to make sure that the players that you bring into your organization are good. If somebody else goes somewhere else and he becomes better or he outperforms the expectation, then so be it. But you have to stay very, very disciplined to what you believe. And it'll help. It helps take a very complicated process and make it a little bit more manageable.
Well, good stuff, DJ. We've kind of gone on a long time. We could keep going on this.
Of course.
And we will dive into some more draft theory and plans for several teams. Mock drafts coming.
Yeah.
The final one, along with the draft board. Please check it out at prepbaseballreport.com, along with draft day coverage. I'm really excited for that. Every time there's a commercial, we are going to be filling that void. So get excited for that. DJ, awesome stuff. For Shooter Hunt, this has been Prep Baseball's The War Room. We'll see you guys next time.